pressure is here. That's the first piece you ought to pay attention to, right? Because in some senses, it's really interesting to go high-low. This thing's high here, low here. That's a change in structural decision-making of a profound kind. Whether you say it and make it explicit or not, this thing is changing in front of you, and it has everything to do with, in some senses, what's happening to you. The second piece to pay attention to is the attacks are coming here. All right? Because that's where the powerful leverage is. The voucher piece moves here. The charter school piece moves here. Although this group can charter as an entity, so can others, and so forth. I want to just point out to you that I think this thing is in full motion in terms of both the structure, all right, of where the policy is saying school happens. And if one had a carte blanche with no politics pressed back, my guess is the policy right now would move to a site-based model. Schools. And it would move to state level, but really the state level is now national. With national standards and measurements to come. Two things for you to pay attention to. The first thing is, and the attack in Wisconsin, Ohio, Florida, and so forth says, if you can unstick here, and you say you cannot bargain at this level anything but wages, which is the thrust of the first four pieces, it means that you, in some senses, are saying the rest is going to be determined here. The second piece is if you look at the shift, SIG and everything else, you've got to pay attention to this, because we're not doing this right, and we're not smart on it yet. And the debate is just beginning with some good union leaders across the country, but it's a conversation in the back room. In some senses, if you design all of your, in the name of fairness, your work rules for all of these places at this level, because you wanted to keep it fair, we are writing that language here, and we are writing 10, 20, 30, 1,000 MOUs in Milwaukee to give us permission to move with alacrity and differences at the site. You gotta wake up on this one. The issue is work rules at the site, not here. This thing is weakening in front of you. And the reason we started, one of the reasons we started in the Southwest, and particularly the Southeast with Perth locals, is we may, believe it or not, have more to learn from North Carolina in the future around how they bargain and where they set work rules. And the last tough piece, because we've got, I've got friends in the school board here and everybody else, you have to ask a tough question in here if you're somebody in my profession, which is organizational change. And I'm trying to help schools everywhere in the country get better at a changing workforce, but especially a changing learning community and so forth. And you're trying to respond here, and you need different tools, and you need to be fast, and you need to be in some senses in the north and the south and east and west of Milwaukee. You need to be different. All right? But you're writing it here, and then you have to unwrite it here. Hundreds of times. But the real issue is all of the resistance. We say it hard because it's not true, but exaggerated. Most of the resistance, 85%, 86.2%, of the resistance that I get any given day on change is coming out of this structure. It doesn't work. The union management and boards don't trust each other. They've all got some sort of reason I cannot move to quality here. This thing is not value added right now. It's in the way. Now, it's one man's riff on this thing, but I'm simply saying, look at the policy, look at the direction, look at what actually is the delivery system. And, if this thing was smooth, collaborative, listened well, and enhanced this, I'd say, bring it on. All right? But it's basically locked up against each other, frozen with each group bringing huge amounts of control and work rules. And if you built your lean-to here, and you say, no, the contracts are here, there are huge amounts of, as you know, other places where we've all worked. You know, I've spent 20 years at UAW and the machines and so forth. There's a nice model in UAW where we basically negotiate wages, all right, benefits here, and we negotiate all work rules here. Which would mean you'd have to retrain staff to do it here, have a process, so forth, have some limits. But we're already doing a lot of that. I was in Louisville. We've got a Louisville contract, and we've had it for years, where 2/3 of the faculty, now that's a Kentucky state-based and site-based kind of piece of legislation behind it, but if 2/3 of the faculty want some exceptions to work rules here, we go here. But look at, look what we're doing. The SIG grants, every one of them, we're looking at extended time. That's not like the other high schools, it's this high school. We're looking at different kinds of pay. It's this high school, not these. We're taking this thing apart, one by one. Right? When in some senses we have to step back and say, what's our investment here? We got to do what Randy's doing, which is deconstruct. What do I really believe here? Do I believe fast and fair, as opposed to all the rules? If I believe that, then how do I rethink this thing fast enough to get ahead of the curve? Otherwise, we end up reacting. Well, two pieces. One in the frame, basically two things this morning. One is the evaluation piece. It's moving. I think it's moving pretty well. It's getting richer every day. I would say there's three pieces, and the last piece I would allude to is because we're in Illinois. I'd look at it. We had an outside threat, a threat we had never seen before. We'd never heard of these folks when they walked in and out of Oregon. Right? And all of a sudden they're in here, and they are not far-right dollars and a bunch of crazy brothers. Right? They were up the road. But here it's far-left money. It's old Adelman money, and so forth. And it's in Illinois, and they captured not the Republican fringe, they captured dead center Democrats. And our friend of many centuries, for whatever reasons, all right, moves to basically say, we are moving. This is out of the House, the Democratic House, with a Democratic governor in Illinois. Basically, the threat comes right at collective bargaining. But the piece here that's fascinating, because we've worked on it a long time, is that the Federation, the Education Association, and Chicago Teachers Union, we all know that Chicago Teachers Union is in some sense a third entity, very powerful, and so forth. All three of them sat down, came together themselves, unheard of in this state. All three of them sat down, came together, and then engaged the committee in the legislature, and had basically, and you ought to look at it, if you look at Massachusetts, you ought to look at Randy's piece, you ought to look at the new legislation if you haven't, and I know 3/4 of the room is Illinois. Look at what it is, all right, that's being moved on. All right, I'll give you one piece so you can hear, all right, hear the thing move. Hear it move. This is designed by three unions, tough unions, historically, in a union state with a Democratic legislature and a Democratic government. SB 7 also establishes new reduction in force procedures for teachers outside of Chicago. Chicago has some exceptions for this, but it's still moving right along together. Right? Effective immediately upon passage, a complex system of performance tiers will be established first. I want you to hear and listen to the changed order of the tiers. First, establishes categories of teaching positions, as is currently done under existing law. So there's positions, certifications. Second, places teachers in each category who have the required certifications and qualifications. Third, places teachers in each category into one of 4 groups or performance tiers that are defined based upon tenure status and varying levels of performance ratings. And finally, ranks teachers within each category by seniority. Pushed by, in some senses, an external force, an enemy in quotes, at least somebody's certainly pushing outside with external money and so forth. I think the three unions came together here, really thought about this, did what I'm arguing is, you deconstruct, you say, stop. What do we really stand for here? We stand for fairness, and this thing also has a speed piece, much like Randy's, that simply says within 100 days these things will be settled. and this is how. Not 3 years, 100 days. How can we make it fair? There's due process throughout each of them. But in some senses, it's simply saying some of these issues are legitimate. All right? And we are going to move ahead of the curve. I would argue in Massachusetts, it's a wonderful example. At the national level, coming out of the Federation, I think changes, and we get a good deal of cover there. All right? And finally, the NEA is certainly inside, working very hard right now to look at how you say both things, defend and protect, and move on reform. And it's a double agenda, it's a new agenda, and it's hard to design. But in some senses, you can expect in the next 60 days, right, that to be out and basically being debated as well. What you need from your national leaders is cover, because they can't do it, and they don't. You have to do it, and that's why we're in rooms like this. It's moving at the state level, and it's moving deep in the LEAs and at the site. These are neat rooms, because in some senses, this is a union coming alive again. It's a place where you ought to be thoughtful, safe, to share data, and to basically get after it the way we're getting after it. That's the argument. Second piece is pay attention to the shifts and levels here. I think this thing is big time moving. And if you look at the policy strategies, they're coming at us really low. And they're coming at us because they really believe, and there's a reason to believe it, that is the unit of change, because that's the delivery level. And we're going to have to somehow think through our generic work rules. We're going to have to think through a bunch of things that come with that. We can do this. We can design kind of a generic fairness piece. You know, the same way we're doing a bunch of places. So you add 3 weeks to PRA high school. Well, hell, we know how to multiply. Did that. So we add a multiplier in the contract. I mean, it's not terrible.